Morning, guys. We're going to start closer to 8:32. There is a focus question, and then this is kind of rare. I do want you to do the do now, so you can add that to your notebook. I would like to share in the chat and eventually, but we will give everyone till 8:32 to get in, so you have plenty of time to kind of think about this. Again, for those that just came in, we're starting in 2 minutes. Please copy down the focus question and also try and do the do now. It's a little bit of a discussion I would like to have. We'll start in 1 minute. Still trying to stall for people to get here. I think there's always a group of people that always forget that their schedule changed to first period. They have social studies. But for those that came in, please just copy down the focus question. There is a do now as well. So you guys please work on that. Yes, Winderley. Are you trying the raise your hand feature or you have a question? Okay. Yeah, there's a new feature on your Google Meets that says raise hands, which is like it's like instead of writing in the chat, I have a question, you can just raise your hand. It's up to you if you want to do that. But yep, Jessica, you're trying it. Jessica, if you have a question, of course, you can raise your hand and ask. But I kind of like the old way, just like people like, I have a question in the chat. It's so easy for me to hit that button, right? Now I raised a hand, right? And it just comes up in the bottom left of my screen, so it's like tough for me to like navigate who's raising their hand sometimes. Yeah, it's better to just ask in the chat. Yeah, I agree. Because I'm more looking at the PowerPoint more than I'm looking at the screen. So I have the chat box open and I have the PowerPoint open, so it's like tough for me to have both open or all three open. So yeah, I'd rather you guys just use the chat box. But if you wanted to raise hand, I'm certainly not opposed to it. All right, 44. I think we should be over 50, but this may be what we're getting to start, which is fine. All right, so let's take a look at the focus question. How did abolitionists try and help to get rid of slavery? I want to really just focus in on the do now to start, because you're going to learn about a lot of movements in history. So what does that kind of mean? So in the chat, if anyone had a good answer for the do now or wants to write one in for number one, what is a movement in history, or what is the goal of a movement? All right, why do we have a movement in history? Because there's going to be a couple of these that we're really going to have to know. Okay, so movement in history is something that drastically changed an event, and the goal of a movement is to find a certain result you were looking for. Yeah, Abigail was here early, so that's probably because it's been up since 827. So yeah, sometimes it doesn't actually change an event, but sometimes the goal is to try and change an event. I would say that's the only thing. A movement that the government makes to make a change. So Gentiana, I would say the government can eventually make a change, but usually a government doesn't start a movement. Usually a movement is started by the people in the country. Usually you'll see something like a social movement or a political movement, and then eventually the government will make the final change to make the movement a success or not. It was an attempt at a revolution. Doesn't always have to be, Maheen. It doesn't always have to be attempt at a revolution. Sometimes you just may want a change within the country. All right, the goal is for a social change or political change. Yep. But the change may not always happen. That's the key thing. Sometimes a change will not actually take place. Some movements are much more successful than others. All right. So number two, what are some movements that you are familiar with in American history? So I've already seen someone write the women's rights movement, which is correct. We started that already in class with the Seneca Falls Convention. Aura is correct. The other really big one will be the civil rights movement, which was a movement to try and get more equality for African Americans and specifically ending segregation. Okay. BLM, Black Lives Matter, yep, that is considered a movement to probably curtail police brutality, and then maybe a couple of other things. But I think the major focus is, ending police brutality. LGBTQ movement. Yeah, sure. The gay rights movement, the LGBTQ movement. Okay, that would definitely be one. All right. Any others, please post in the chat if you know any other movements. Yeah, this abolitionism is a movement. Yeah, so this is one of them. That's why we're learning about it now. Okay. Give everyone 10 more seconds, see if they know any others. Okay, you guys got some of the major ones, though. So, Bliar, it's interesting. There's something called the independence movement, but we don't know it is that. The independence movement was the Revolutionary War. I don't really know it as that, but it kind of was a movement. Okay, people are trying to change the laws of King George and trying to get rid of the King George and Britain owning us. So that is a possible movement. So it's not really looked at as one. So that's a really interesting one. All right. So that is correct. All right. We're going to look at a lot of movements through American history. And what you need to just understand is there's always an end goal. Okay. Maheen, yes, I was waiting for the feminist movement to come out because it's a little different than the women's rights movement. Okay. Though they sometimes are overlapping in some ways. The feminist movement and the women's rights movement were a little bit different, had different goals, even though they both had to do with women. So we'll talk about all of those. So a huge portion, now I know this is, way down the road. When we start writing our first thematic essays, no, Gentian, I wouldn't say that would be considered a social movement. That was a physical movement. That would not be a social or political movement. That's not the type of movement I was referring to. But I could see the confusion with that. All right. So with that being said, one of the big things when you get to your thematic essays, one of the biggest topics is movements in American history. All right, so this is the first time we're kind of being introduced to looking at a movement and looking at how people kind of step up in that movement. And within every movement, you have thousands to tens of thousands, sometimes millions of people a part of it, right? The population of the country, but then you have major leaders. A lot of the times in these movements, we look at the major leaders of the movement, okay? But we also understand that this maybe went a little bit larger than just the actual 4 or 5 people that we look at. All right. So when we looked at the women's rights movement in Seneca Falls, to start, okay, we are going to look at, we looked at Elizabeth Cady Stanton a little bit, Lucretia Mott, but we don't really go into all of the people a part of the women's rights movement. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing now. We're going to look at one of the biggest movements in American history that came up right around the 1850s. Lasted about 10 to 15 years, and this was called the Abolitionist movement. All right. And for those that don't know, abolition comes from the word abolish. Okay? And abolish means to get rid of. All right. So it's a very simple word when you think about it. It was a goal for people to help try and get rid of slavery. All right. So please copy this slide down in red. I'll give you a minute to do it. I'll be quiet. Okay. So taking a look at the abolitionist movement, first we want to identify the goal because every movement has a goal. All right. The women's rights movement was a lot more, when we started it, had a lot more goals. One of their main goals was to get women the right to vote, but they also had other goals along with that, trying to get more women in the workplace, trying to have them more equally paid. Right. There's a lot more different goals of a women's rights movement. There's a lot of goals of the civil rights movement, but they always have a main goal. So the abolitionist movement, they're very straightforward because they just really just focus in on the main goal. And that was to try and get rid of or abolish the institution of slavery within the United States. All right, so notice it's going to start at the people level. Okay, the people in our country are the ones that are going to try and come together and do this before the government makes any changes. Okay, and we'll see through the process of how they did this. So when the Compromise of 1850 came out, a lot of Northerners and even Southerners really saw how the fugitive slave law and how slavery got a lot more put in their face. Okay, because you're going to see some things start to happen when you get to the videos where, innocent black people would sometimes be taken into slavery. All right, and that may be someone that you were familiar with or you knew, and that can maybe start to change your opinion. One of the most underrated things that people don't understand is a lot of people in the North weren't really familiar with slavery. It's not like it's 2020 where you have the internet, you have news stories, you're able to look things up. If you weren't surrounded by slavery, you maybe heard stories about it, but you weren't so familiar with it. All right. But by the 1850s, everyone has a much better sense of what it entails to be a slave. And if you're a humanitarian type of person and you saw the African American maybe not as a piece of property and you saw that as a human being, All right. That obviously breaks your heart. So a lot of people started to join up and gain interest in the abolitionist movement. Now, when it starts early on in 1850, there's not a lot of people in it. But over time, it starts to gain a lot of traction, starts to gain a lot of steam. Okay. And one of my things that I never really understood when I was a kid, when I was your age, I kind of just assumed all people in the abolitionist movement were black. All right. That's okay, Sanjita. So I thought they were all black. But if you look at the photo here, you know, Frederick Douglass, black male, Harriet Tubman, black female. But then you get to John Brown, who we'll learn a lot about. All right. He's a white male. Harriet Beecher Stowe's a white female. William Lloyd Garrison's a white male. And Sojourner Truth is a black female. So there's a wide range of people, okay, that are a part of every movement. And that's really the key thing to understand. Every movement has people from all genders, from people from all races. All right. It's not really solidified by one group. Now, obviously, there'll probably be a larger portion of population that are black in the abolitionist movement. But it doesn't go to say that it's all black people in the abolitionist movement. That was something I was mistaken when I was a kid your age. And then as I got older, I started to realize that that's obviously not true. All right. So each abolitionist had different roles of helping slaves get their freedom. They all kind of did it in different ways. All right. So to give you an example, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, these are former slaves. All right. These are people that are going to use their experience as a slave to try and encourage people to become a part of this movement. Frederick Douglass writes a very famous autobiography, as you're about to learn. Harriet Tubman, for those that don't know, is a big deal with the Underground Railroad, okay, and really just trying to forcefully get people to their freedom. But John Brown was never a slave. Harriet Beecher Stowe was never a slave. William Lloyd Garrison was never a slave. They helped out in different ways, all right? Probably, believe it or not, the biggest two people on the Regents for the abolitionist movement, if you just want to make a note of this, is probably actually Harriet Beecher Stowe and William Lloyd Garrison. Because they're going to focus on the written works that are really going to help out the African-American community and trying to stop slavery. Though probably Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman are two of the bigger abolitionists that are known, even though they don't come up on the test as much. So I've just always found that interesting. Everyone knows Harriet Tubman. Not as many people knew Harriet Beecher Stowe, but Harriet Beecher Stowe has a huge push in trying to change people's opinions on slavery. All right. And some of these people are just normal, everyday people looking to help out. But these are your 6 major abolitionist movement. For the Regents, we're going to look at 5. We're actually not going to look at Sojourner Truth because she is a part of the abolitionist movement. But we'll look at her more with the women's rights movement a little bit later on. So we'll keep her separate. We're going to look at these 5 for today's assignment. All right. So let's go into today's assignment and let's really break down how this is going to go. Now, the first thing I want to mention, okay, when I share this tab, all right, please note that this is a 2-day assignment. So my expectation is you are to not finish this over the next 20 to 25 minutes. All right. Hopefully you're halfway done. Hopefully you have a good sense. Hopefully you're taking your time with it. This is not a rush. Usually I'm always pushing the envelope for you to try and get things done. We're in a great position. We're actually a couple days ahead of last year's class. I really don't know how because we started a week later, but I think without all the ELA tests and MOSLs and DRPs, we've been able to catch up. So we're at a very good spot in our curriculum, our pacing. So we're in no rush. So I'm going to give you a full 2 days to work on this, well, at least a period and a half. All right. So this is a 2-day assignment. Okay. And also tonight you have your, it is Thursday, you have your 7th textbook reading assignment, okay, due for textbook Thursday. So you guys can work on that too by the end of the day today. There is a rumor going around that since next week is Thanksgiving, Mr. Panio might be nice and there might be no textbook assignment, but we cannot confirm or deny that at this point. All right, so definitely get this one done. All right, so we are going to look at a couple things here. Now, I first want to point out you have 6 readings, okay? And they're labeled to what each reading, what each person is. The only thing is Frederick Douglass is a little bit longer. So as you can see, there are 2 Frederick Douglass readings because it's just 2 pages and I know how to fit them into 1 page and leave me alone. Okay, so there's 2 parts of Frederick Douglass. Okay, I couldn't figure out how to put it into 1. All right. And then, of course, Harriet Beecher Stowe, John Brown. Okay, there's readings on all of these people, and you're going to go through and read through each one. All right. So what you should do is when you open up the Google Doc, all right, you're going to notice a couple of things. All right, I would say it's just best to go in order. All right, but there's 3 boxes here. So I want to just make sure I'm clear on what you have to do. The only one you have to do for this assignment as of right now are these boxes. Okay? What was the biggest contribution by this person to trying to stop slavery? And other important notes from the reading, try and get each 2 each. Okay? You'll notice there's a box on the right, but you're not writing anything in this box. That is actually going to be a box that we're going to do together a little bit later on tomorrow. So you guys are just focusing on these boxes. So even though there's 3 boxes, you're just focusing on 2. So I think you start with the most famous, Harriet Tubman. She's by far the biggest name in the abolitionist movement, okay, by far. All right. And then we go into some of the other ones, okay? I would actually suggest, maybe I should have flipped these, but I would actually suggest to start with this box first. Try and get 2-3 details of notes on each person. Now, we're in a Regents class. I don't need you to tell me what year Harriet Tubman was born in. That's not an important note or detail. What were they doing that was important for the abolitionist movement? Okay? If you write that Harriet Tubman was born in the year 1800 and then died in the year 1899 or whatever it is, or 1901, whatever year it was, that's not important in terms of a Regents class. So what specific things from the notes, excuse me, what specific things from the reading are important for the abolitionist movement? We don't really care that they had children. We don't really care about any of that stuff. What is important for the movement? Okay. After you write your 2 important notes or details down, you should then go back to this box and say, okay, what was the biggest contribution of this particular person to try and stop slavery? And that may overlap. You may have one from here, and then it's the same answer from this one. All right. But the ultimate thing is it's your job to try and figure out what to do. All right. Your goal should be you should spend about 8 minutes on each person. Okay, so you spend 8 minutes on Harriet Tubman, 8 minutes on William Lloyd Garrison. Your goal today is to have 2 or 3 done. And then tomorrow when you come in, you're going to have the first 20 minutes to work on this as well. Not the whole period, but the first 20 minutes to work on this particular group of people. All right. I think at this point, it should be pretty clear what you're doing. Again, you're just working on the first 2 boxes. Okay, trying to fill this out as best you can. We will work on box 3 tomorrow, and we will do that together. All right. Are there any questions at this point? Please just write in the chat if there is. But I think it should be pretty clear what the expectation is at this point. All right. Going once, going twice. I'm going to mute myself at this point. You guys could work on this assignment. And yeah, that should be it. Okay, let me know if you have questions. I'll be taking attendance and I'll be here. No one should be going anywhere.